What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Letterman Lounge for another episode of the Letterman Lounge. Let's talk, Matt. Ohio State starting to get to the midway point. I said it earlier this week. I'm not going to call it the midway point because I think this class is going to be bigger, but a lot of movement in the new On3 rankings. They were released earlier this week. We are here to break them down. Of course, Matt Parker on the other side of that screen. I am Spencer Holbrook. It is Lettermen Row. But you already know that because you're watching this wonderful, wonderful recruiting breakdown. Matt, not going to waste any time with the orange juice talk like we did last time. Orange juice is good. Let's just put a pin in that. But how you doing, buddy?
Uh, Good. Had some OJ this morning. Real
I'm
good.
proud. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Ohio State's certainly eating the most important meal of the day, which is recruiting when it comes to football. You see what I did there? Especially on the offensive side of the ball, Matt. The new on 300, as we like to call them, are absolutely littered with Ohio State offensive commits. Of course, the defensive side a little bit lacking just because the Buckeyes are still a work in progress when it comes to defensive recruiting right now. They've got a lot of leads, a lot of leans. A lot of guys are have Ohio State at number one. I don't think that there's any reason for concern on the defensive side of the ball. But simply put, this on 300, the latest on 300, is loaded with Buckeyes offensive talent. And that's okay for right now, as long as when it comes out in January that the defensive side is also loaded with on three talent. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at Ohio State has 8 prospects inside. Well, let me just double check my math here, but Ohio State has about 8 prospects inside the top 300, and the first four of those eight are offensive commits to the class. Which I mean, given the fact that there are simple math here says that there are 12 commits in the class, and 10 of them are on the offensive side of the ball. So yeah, that's the law of averages here. Is going to kind of pan out and say, well, probably most of the prospects, the committed prospects in Ohio State's class, if they're in the top 300, they're going to be offensive players. Um, the top two guys, I don't really think there's a need to really break down the fact that Jeremiah Smith is the best wide receiver in America. Like, I don't think that's any breaking news to anybody. Mylan Graham is still recognized as the number 12 overall prospect. He did drop down or one position spot in the wide receiver rankings. He's now the number 4 wide receiver by On3 instead of the number 3. Um, Big deal. I would like to know the difference between 3 and 4. I don't think it's as big as a difference between 2 and 3, and certainly not as big as between 1 and 2. Um, so you take what you can get. I think it certainly matters, though, that he's considered the number 12 overall prospect as a skill player playing in Indiana. Like, that says something to me. It does. Um,
Absolutely.
our home region of the Midwest produces the big boys, not the skill guys, where they can do 7-on-7s in South Florida every weekend. But Mylan Graham representing for the Midwest, Spencer.
Uh, I think statistically you are correct that a lot of skill guys don't come from the Midwest, but Ohio State's had success finding those guys in the Midwest and turning. Look at Terry McLaurin. That's a great example of a guy from Indiana. Maybe some Ohio State fans will see a little bit of Terry McLaurin in Mylan Graham's game from the slot. Terry kind of worked from the outside, but he's a smaller guy, I think. Uh, Matt, one big surprise from these rankings. You are the expert. I don't need to talk everyone's ear off. If you have one big surprise from these rankings, what would it be? There's 8 guys to choose from. Maybe it's a target, not a commit. But one, your big surprise as we look at the new on 300.
I think my biggest surprise is just the continuous downfall for offensive lineman Ian Moore. He is hanging on to a spot in the top 300. He's now at 272. He's the number 16 interior offensive lineman in the newest update. And you look at his On3 industry ranking, which is a combination of all 4 major recruiting services, and there's some new math behind it. It used to be an even split among the 4, which is On3, ESPN, Rivals, and 247. The math has been changed a little bit, but he's I believe with that industry ranking, he's the number 2 interior offensive lineman, and then like the number 85 or something overall prospect. That's quite a difference between 272 and 16, respectfully. Um, we don't do the rankings. If we did, we'd probably be maybe a little biased, to be quite honest with you, just because these are kids that are offered by Ohio State and committed to Ohio State. So obviously they're good, even if they are developed a little bit of a developmental project, like some players in this class are. They're still good. I mean, they're good enough to go to Ohio State. So yeah. But the Ian Moore is like one of the top guys on their board. Um, and they got him pretty early too. Justin Fry is obviously a very good and thorough evaluator of talent. Uh, we've seen that. We saw that with his recruiting process with the Armstrong twins. I mean, that didn't go the length of the cycle, obviously, but that's a process that went back all the way to March of 2022. And then we see that kind of come full circle this March when they commit after developing and like becoming what they want to be. And they are also in the On300. Actually, both of the brothers are ahead of Ian Moore. Now, am I going to sit here and say that I think that should be the case? I don't know. I do know St. Ed's played against a very tough schedule, and they were 15-0 Division I Ohio State champions. So like that's big.
Yeah.
But from a football standpoint, do I think Ian Moore is probably better than the Twins? Maybe. I don't think Ian is 272. But there's a reason why I don't get paid to do that. I don't
Uh,
want that job. I don't want that job either. I'll tell you that
I
much.
I don't think I do either. Maybe it comes with a little bit of a pay bump. We'll see. Maybe. I don't know. See where the wind takes me in this journey. Matt, for some context, let's throw it out there. On3 doesn't shy away from the industry comparison. Let's talk about it. On3 has Ian Moore at number 272, the number 18 interior offensive lineman in the country. The
Mm,
reason that I stress interior is the fact that Rivals has him as a tackle. He's the number 32 overall player in the Rivals rankings. He's the number 1 tackle in the country, according to Rivals. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 98 overall player, the number 4 interior offensive lineman. So the reason that I bring all that up, there's a split decision from the recruiting services, all of which do a pretty good job. I'm a little biased, I think we do a really good job. I think Charles Power does a really good job. Cody Belair, those guys are good. There's a split between whether Ian Moore is an offensive tackle or an interior offensive lineman. Right now, I believe Ohio State sees him as a tackle. That's not to say that he will be a tackle. Paris Johnson played a year at guard despite being the best tackle in the draft this year. So like you can do both. Get you a man
right.
who can do both. So I think Ian Moore can probably do both. And that just means that there's still a lot of wiggle room for Ian Moore. I could see him taking another tumble based on rankings and where his body grows. He's 6'6" and On3 season as an interior guy. The 6'6" is probably too big to play on the interior, which might be the reason for the fall. Rivals sees him as 6'6", maybe add 20 more pounds, and he's a tackle. So the
Right.
body's going to tell a lot about what his rankings where his ranking goes from here. If he falls, if he has a good senior year, rises back up, if he takes a camp circuit and shows off against some 5-star, 4-star defensive ends and shows On3 and 24/7 that he's a tackle, then you'll see his ranking go back up. So I just think that there's, especially with Ian Moore, and I'm glad you bring him up as the biggest surprise, there's so much wiggle room for him. And I think that's going to be key for him to try to move up and help Ohio State's ranking in this class because Ohio State, let's put it simply, Matt, they're going to be trying for the number 1 class in the country for the first time in a long time.
And I think also part of the reason why you've seen it wasn't just Ian Moore. I mean, I'm 3 of Ohio State's offensive linemen that are in the On300, they all fell. And I think that's just a product of it's 7-on-7 season right now. Evaluators are out and about watching kids play. Some people call it fake football. It is what it is. I do believe Brandon Innes has called it fake football before, and he has played in it. But I just think that's funny. A little side
Played
note there.
well in it. Played
He
well in it.
did. He played very well in it. Part of South Florida Express. But there's not really a whole lot that offensive linemen can really do to, to really bump their stock. You mentioned the camp circuit. Do I think a guy like Ian Moore will camp? I don't know. If he does, he's obviously only going to camp at Ohio State because he's committed there and he's very locked into Ohio State. Um, I could see reasons why he wouldn't, but I could also see reasons why he would. And I think the reasons why he would are certainly not related to his ranking. I mean, there are some people that like just do not care about that because they know they're good. As the kids would say, they know that they're him, you know? Like I'm sure Ian Moore knows that he's him when he steps out onto a field on Friday night. He knows that he's the guy. Um, but if there is a reason to camp, it's so that he can get some instruction from Justin Fry the year before he's going to be at Ohio State, which is obviously very beneficial to him.
Yeah.
If the Armstrong twins decide to, if three-star Toledo Central Catholic guard Mark Nave decides to do that, it's more instruction for these guys.
Mhm.
Um, let me toss you a question here. Who is a guy that is inside the On300 that is an Ohio State commit that you think is perfectly rated, not counting Jeremiah Smith?
Right now,
Yes.
well, it's kind of funny, Matt, because we're going to do underrated guys here in just a little bit. And I was actually going to make the argument that Jeremiah Smith is underrated. So at number three overall, and that's not a joke. I think he's generational. I think that he is what they say he is. He's as talented at this stage in his career as like Julio Jones was, and he's the gold standard for all of those people who are down in Florida and watch 7-on-7 for a living. So I think he's underrated, and we'll get to that in a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, and you can let me stand on a soapbox. How about that? But anyway, right now I'm going to say Aaron Nolan. I think he's perfectly rated. I think I still need to see more from him as far as just a senior year to really solidify that he's going to be a 5-star prospect. On three at the end of this whole shebang, when we get to December and these kids all sign on the dotted line, they're going to have 32 5-stars. Right now, Aaron Nolan is the number 42 overall player in the country and the number 4 quarterback. On average, there's between 2 on a bad year and like 6 on a good year, 5-star quarterbacks. He's in line to be a 5-star quarterback. If he has another good year where he throws for 4,000 yards, 55 touchdowns, wins the state championship, he's going to be a 5-star quarterback. And I think that his trajectory right now shows perfectly where he should be. He's a 4-star kid. Ohio State really likes him. Jeremiah Smith really likes him, which is super important in this whole equation to make sure that your 5-star generational receiver likes the quarterback that's going to be throwing to him. He's a little different for a lefty, so I think the evaluation makes it a little more difficult to truly put him as a 5-star just yet. But the athleticism is going to stand out. The way that he moves around on the field is going to stand out. The way his accuracy continues to progress is going to stand out. The fact that Ryan Day likes him enough to take him as a commit right now should stand out to these rankings experts. I think that he's in the perfect spot to become a 5-star player. And it shows. He's the number 42 overall player right now, and there's nowhere to go but up, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree with that. On the Lettermen Lounge message board, someone had asked me where I thought Aaron Nolan was going to finish in terms of like the quarterback spots, not the overall spot, but just quarterback spot. And I think he's the number 5 or number 6 quarterback off. This is all off the top of my head right now. I have the information in front of me, but I'm holding myself accountable to know these rankings like I know my social security number, which is gotcha. Um, I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be a top 3 quarterback. I really think that. I do believe that former Ohio State quarterback commit Dylan Raiola will just hang on to that number 1 spot. Julian Sand could push for it. I absolutely could see that, especially since, playing in California and stuff like that. I think the competition in California might be a little bit better than Arizona, which is not to scoff at Arizona high school football, because that's kind of slept on high school football, in my opinion. But California is just historically one of the hotbeds of high school football. But you see that number 3 spot, and that's where things kind of, they get interesting. They get really interesting.
They get a little hairy, Matt. They get a little hairy.
You have names like DJ Lagway, Florida commit right now. You have Jaden Davis, Michigan commit right now. You have Aaron Nolan in that mix. I think there's serious potential for Aaron Nolan, and you mentioned this earlier. He threw for 4,055 yards or something like that, 55 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in Class 6A, which is ridiculous in Georgia. I mean, that's like some of the best high school football in America. Um, and he made it look like he was playing in Pop Warner. I mean, it's ridiculous. So yeah, there's definitely potential for him to keep progressing. He was just named an MVP at some rivals camp the day after he was at Ohio State's spring game. So like, yeah, he can sling it around very well. I think a guy for me that is like perfectly rated, like is at the perfect spot, is the only defensive commit that's in the class right now, and that's Garrett Stover. He's the number 153 overall player. He's the number 11 linebacker. A very, very solid 4-star prospect. I think given the talent uh, that Garrett Stover at Big Walnut plays in Central Ohio and what he can do and what he has shown on the field, I think that's just a perfect spot for him. There are linebackers that are better than him, and that's okay to say that. Um, there are certainly linebackers that are better than him. I they look more like linebackers. Now Garrett has grown quite a bit throughout this offseason. I saw him, he was at one of Ohio State's spring practices, and I'm like, that is not the guy that I saw in November at the Michigan game. So like he continues to build upon that frame. And everyone's quick comparison to him is Pete Warner. And, there was such a positional versatility with Pete that Garrett Stover also has. He's a linebacker that runs a 4.5.
Yeah.
He could play safety if he wanted to. If Ohio State wanted him to, he could play a safety. But he's so physical and he just reads so quickly that's your will linebacker in this class. They're not done at linebacker yet. That'll be a teaser for another show. I think there's one or two more guys that they're trying to get for the room. But as it stands right now, their will linebacker is going to be Garrett Stover, number 153 overall. And I just think there might be some potential for him to move. But I mean, if you look at the overall shift, in the last rankings, he was number 147, and now he's 153. And he's running track right now. So it's
He's
like
gonna, yeah.
that's a good spot for him. That's a really good spot for him.
Matt, I think he's going to stay around that 150 range.
Yeah.
If we look at this honestly, take an honest assessment where he is compared to other guys around the country who you maybe have more defined skill sets at linebacker, especially if he moved to athlete, maybe I could see him move up in the rankings. But I think as long as he's a linebacker, according to the experts, I think he's going to stay around that 150 range, and that's fine. You look at a guy like Gabe Powers, who stayed around that 50 to 90 range his entire recruitment, and that was completely fine. He might have ended up maybe, number 40 or something like that. But it wasn't quite a 5-star. Everyone knew he wasn't going to be a true 5-star. It was between 35 and like 80 the entire time he was in his recruiting process, and it was perfectly fitting for him. And so if you have Garrett Stover stay between 180 and 120 throughout his entire 60-player range, because you got guys falling, you got guys rising, I think that fits Garrett. And then
absolutely.
And just really quick, back to your quarterback talk before we were talking about Aaron Nolan a little bit. It's going to be fascinating to me, and I don't follow a lot of high school football other than the guys who are in recruiting. But look at the top 10 quarterbacks in the On300. The first 3 are from Arizona, California, Texas. Okay, cool. Number 4, Georgia. Number 5, Georgia. Number 7, Georgia. Number 8, North Carolina. So number 10, Georgia. Georgia high school football this year is going to determine the order of these quarterbacks. You got a guy like Jake Merklinger who's committed to Tennessee. I think could really rise in these rankings and give Aaron Nolan a run for that number 3 quarterback. You've got a guy like Luke Cromanhook. I think that's how you say it, who's committed to Florida State, who is another guy who could rise. The only guy that I don't know can rise that much is Jaden Davis, and that's not because he's committed to Michigan. That's not a knock on Jaden at all. Go back to the videos in 2021 and 2022 when I was beating the drum crazily for Ohio State to take Jaden Davis. I'm a big Jaden Davis fan. He's 6 foot tall.
Yeah.
So the evaluators see 6 foot compared to 6'3.5" from Luke Cromenhook. You see 6'2" from Aaron Nolan. You see, 6'3", 220 from Rayola. Like they're just not the same kind of player. And so I don't see Jaden Davis really taking that next step in the rankings. But I just think that Georgia is going to prove a lot. Georgia and North Carolina, that area, it'd be fun to track these quarterbacks based on how they do in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and I have talked about this for well, before a very long time, that Georgia just is producing aliens right now. That state is just producing football aliens, and then they go on and win national championships at places, and then they go win Super Bowl rings. Whatever's in the water, I'm moving to Georgia. All right.
You
That
know,
humidity, actually, I can't do it. I like it up here. It's nice in Ohio.
I had a grandfather who once told me a saying, and I'll say it for the state of Georgia. I hope PETA doesn't care, but you couldn't swing a dead cat in Georgia without hitting a Division I athlete. So
that's
get a little of my roots coming out in me. But
that's a new twist on an old saying from you, I've heard.
Matt, we're gonna move on and go again. One underrated prospect in the On 300. Give it to me.
In the On 300. Um, well, I kind of feel like I have to stick with Ian Moore.
Okay. Yeah.
I kind of beat the drum on him at 272, and you said what he was like number 32 or something overall somewhere else. Apples and oranges, I suppose, but uh, it's very hard for me to ignore the fact that three other places have said this about one guy. You make a good point that it's hard to evaluate him because I know this is how On3 does it. Talking with Charles Power and Cody Beller, they look at the long-term projection for these players, right? So if they look at Ian Moore right now, who's a rising senior in high school, by the time he leaves Ohio State, they think that he's an interior offensive lineman. So like, and I was told by both of these gentlemen that they don't watch the highlights; they watch full games. That's why it takes so long for them to do it, because think about how much they're always watching film. Okay.
Yeah.
Always watching film. Um, and so, maybe there's something on film that makes Ian the 272 best high school football player in America, which when you word it that way, that's really good because he's an offensive lineman and he's better than how many kids you think play high school football in America? Not enough, probably, in my opinion, but
I would agree with that.
that's we've got a lot of personal interjections in this show.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not bad, but for Ohio State, they don't want 272. They want the best. They obviously think Ian Moore is the best. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken him and everything like that. Long-winded answer to say it's Ian Moore for me.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna go non-commit. I was gonna go with Jeremiah Smith, but guys, I could do 45 minutes on Jeremiah Smith. It's the best receiver prospect you can watch. Go flip on the highlights. I know that those guys watch full games and they still rank him as that. So if you watch the highlights, then you'll really be blown away. I'm gonna go. I just think this offensive line class is a little underrated. Like guys like Gerby Lambert, guys like Daniel Cruz, who Ohio State both guys really high on. You look at Lambert, who I think is probably a little too underrated here. Let's see exactly where he is. This
I know
makes for
he's at
great
number
podcasting.
30.
He's at number 32, and like I think that he's better than that. You look at Daniel Cruz, who's in the 150s. I think he's better than that, and that's not just because Ohio State's targeting them, but it kind of is in a way because Justin Fry has the liberty now. He's got guys committed already. He's at the liberty now to go out and find the best of the absolute best, target them, and focus in like a laser, man, on what he wants in this tackle. And he's going to try to find a tackle or just a generational type of, or a real difference maker on the interior, like maybe Daniel Cruz is more than a tackle, but like Gerby Lambert is a tackle who Justin Fry really likes, and he's locked in on, and Ohio State really likes, and they've locked in on. That cannot be dismissed. Brandon Baker, another guy. Just I'm not trying to throw out a bunch of guys, but like this offensive line class as a whole, if Ohio State's going after them right now, I think they're underrated because they should be higher because they right now have the freedom to go target any offensive lineman they could possibly want and really try to make a push for that offensive lineman. The fact that it's Brandon Baker and it's Gerby Lambert and it's Daniel Cruz, I think that shows you where Ohio State rates those guys. and look at different places who are releasing these, who pumps out the best players.
Right.
Ohio State's at the top of those lists. So if Ohio State thinks you can be an NFL level offensive lineman, I'm going to listen to the evaluations.
So I have a note about Gerby Lambert and maybe why you feel he is underrated in the rankings. If he did not play in a West Boston, Massachusetts suburb, if he played in Florida or Georgia, with how good he is, he would probably be a top 20 player, a top 15 player.
Yeah.
He's 6'7". His it's the same thing as in the 2023 cycle with Samson Unkinlola, and then oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
There was a lot of them. Ohio State
No,
missed on all of
there
them.
was another kid from New England that was also really good who
Yeah.
committed to Alabama.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
can't remember his name.
Yeah. We're going to, Lassa Lennon.
Yes, yes. New England now sneaky good at high school football. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that discussion. But what I will say is this: you take Gerby Lambert out of the Boston area and you put him in one of the high school football hotbeds, and you see his rankings shoot all the way up. But yes, that's a guy Ohio State has circled in on to really complete this offensive line class. And the fact that Justin Fry can go anywhere in the country now, knowing that he has 4 very, very solid and locked in commits, not only can he recruit the last remaining piece, not only can Mike Seleni recruit the last remaining piece, they have 4 peer recruiters who don't answer phone calls from other schools, who do not text message other schools, that are so locked into Ohio State. I would not be surprised if there are some numbers that are just blocked. I would not be surprised by that. I don't know that for certain. I'm just speculating, but knowing these 4 the way I do, I would not be shocked.
Well, Matt, also, let's not dismiss the fact that the full court press on offensive linemen now includes Ryan Day. It includes Justin Fry, and it includes Brian Hartline. Hartline, one of the best recruiters in America. And so you cannot dismiss the fact that these guys, all 3 now, get to go into living rooms when it comes to crunch time and say, hey, come be a Buckeye. So I think that's kind of important. I think that's a big deal. I think having Brian Hartline be able to go out and recruit offensive linemen now as the offensive coordinator, that's a big deal. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's the rankings update. A lot of ground covered here in the Letterman Lounge on Lettermen Row. Matt will have more fallout from the rankings as new rankings are already beginning to be compiled from Charles Power and Cody Belair. Those guys are very good at their jobs. I know that they take a lot of heat. Rankings experts always do. Every school thinks their player is a 5-star. That's just the way it is. And so those guys do a great job. Jeremiah Smith, number 3 overall. He's the headliner of this class already. Aaron Nolan, another headliner. These offensive linemen only going to continue to rise. And you've got Mylan Graham, you've got Garrett Stover, plenty of targets. Maybe we'll do another show next week, Matt, where we highlight some targets who made some movements in the On300. That's probably a good idea. We'll put that on the books. How about I write that
You know
down?
what? I'll write that down.
Exactly. I got my pen here too. But
Do that.
for now, we're going to put a pin in this show. Other type of pin. That's Matt Parker, the Ohio State recruiting expert at LettermenRow.com. I am Spencer Holbrook. Come check us out. $30 until September. It's a hell of a deal. We'll be there at the Lettermen Lounge talking about it, writing about it, all of that coverage for $30. And Andy Backstrom and Tim May's coverage. We will see you there at LettermenRow.com. See you next time on YouTube.